I will start with the first thing, which is came into a visual design side. So if you wanted to design in any kind of UI, so the first thing is always is like you have to set some of the things. Okay, so what I mean is set some of the thing is like for the basic fundamentals. If your basic fundamentals are right, then your UI design will be look distinct and it will at least look clean in terms of like a visual aspect of it. Okay, so first thing we'll start with the spacing. Okay, so if you see the design here, which is like it's actually showing you the bad spacing kind of example here. Okay, so what we have is their fonts are very close. Then we have unnecessary spacing, or it's like a very not, it's not a consistent spacing between the cards. Okay, and also the consistent spacing is not there in terms of the menu items, and things are not looking right. So yeah, yes. Yeah, Abhinay, can you mute your mic? Yeah, thank you. So I will go with the spacing. Okay, so in the spacing we have incremental values, spacing system, and consistency, and how to use basically a white space. Okay, so these things are very important in the spacing in terms of any kind of UI. It's very important. Okay, so I will give you an example. Okay, so this is basically the example of the spacing system. Okay, so let's say there is a text, right? So this is like a header text, and then there is a footer text, subheader text. Okay, so if you see, the spacing between these two is almost none. It's basically crossing each other, and the spacing is not looking correctly. Okay, but if you see here the right spacing, which is like I given almost like a 8 pixel here, the spacing between 8 pixel is actually feeling just right. Okay, so this is also the difference between where you are setting a groups of things. Okay, so if you are defining exact groups, that will be very helpful for the UX as well as the person who is actually using your application in terms of the readability. Okay, if you see the too much spacing, which is like this, it doesn't feel like a group, right? So it feels like the main header text is different and the subheader text, which is far below it, and it doesn't look that good. So whenever you are doing the spacing thing, you always have to remember that it feels like it actually readable in terms of and plus it looks like belongs to a same group. Okay, so how to set these pixels margin, I will tell you in the spacing system down, but just have to explain that this is like how you should set things. Okay, this is the same example with the card. This spacing is very low as compared to this spacing, which is like feeling it feels right. Okay, if you are using in a mobile system, let's say you are designing an application for the mobile phone, you will feel like this spacing will work for you. Okay, whether this spacing is actually feels like there is just two distinctive separate groups where they both cards are not belongs to each other. Okay, so how you come up with this spacing is like this is how you should set up your spacing system. Okay, so what is this spacing system? Basically, it's like you probably seen this thing into one of the design systems. If you pick up any design system from the Figma, and if you see their spacing system, while designing the application or the website for the first time, you always have to space, you always have to set these things beforehand. Even before that, you have to go to the visual design. Okay, so where here I set the design spacing system is like the incremental values are like a 4 pixel. Okay, so if I set the smallest pixel size for the spacing, it's like a 4 pixel, and that way I can increment this. Okay, so 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24, that way. Okay, so what I'm trying to do, what I'm trying to say is basically like when you are setting the system, you always have something. So let's say I have these two cards, right? And if you I hope you guys are using Figma or Adobe XD for the design. Basically they are quite similar, but just spacing this is like When you're selecting two elements, you can see how much space in between these two elements. So let's say I'm putting 12 pixels. Okay, and then I introduce one more thing. Okay, so it's like, let's say it's a card or something. Okay, I just duplicate that card, combine these two, space shift A, and that will combine into a frame. Okay, so here I can say the spacing system, I can set that spacing. Okay, if it doesn't feels good, I will always increment, but I will always be into these numbers. Okay, so if I'm going with a 4 pixel, 8 pixel, and then 12 pixel, you can't set like a 10 pixel because that's not available in your spacing system. Okay, so always have to be a consistent spacing between the sections. Let's say if I want to even if I want to this and combine these two in a auto layout, I can always set the maximum, like whatever the design system allowed me is like 160. So let's say 160, they told me to set a 160. Okay, so this is like a consistent spacing. So that's how you can set a spacing in the UI design. Okay, this is just one example for the spacing system. You can create your own, or you can use from the design system which are like available on the Figma community, or always you can go onto the websites, just like Carbon Design. We have there is Undesign also. Then we have different brands set up their own spacing systems. You can use any kind of spacing system, but it has to be a consistent. Okay, so this is basically how you set the spacing system in the UI design. Okay, the next thing is basically a color palettes. Okay, so if you see here, the color palettes examples are pretty weird. Okay, I just choose any arbitrary colors from here and I just put it there, which doesn't actually aligns me what I'm trying to do with the application. Every single project or every single application has their own color tone, which actually creates the vibe with that mood. Okay, and some of the brands are actually using their brand colors. So their brand colors is actually giving that UX kind of, from the UX side, if you think about, they actually give that vibe for whatever they want to go with. Okay, so for example, if you want to go with the kind of healthcare kind of system, so healthcare system mostly use the blue color shades, right, to create that trust and transparency kind of vibe. Okay, whether as compared to the any kind of sports events, or let's say there is a website for let's say for the racing kind of thing, so F1 or racing or something, so they probably use a red color kind of thing, actually give you the excitement, power and all those things. Okay, so I will suggest you, if you are going to design an UI which does not have a color palette from your client, or does not have any kind of colors, or basically they will ask you to go with the colors. So basically how you choose colors is actually depends on what kind of vision or what kind of thoughts they want to translate between them to their customers. Okay, so for making this simpler, I will give you examples. Okay, so basically these are the color palettes that I taken from the colorhunt.com. Okay, so if you are going with online, most of the time people are going online and they will find color palettes for them. But if you wanted to go with let's say from the scratch, and you want to create colors by your own, then this is basically the color wheel that you should understand. Okay, in this color wheel we have three primary colors. So RGB, so it's basically like a red, green, blue and green. Okay, so these are basically the primary colors, this one, and this one. Okay, and then we have a secondary colors, so basically this one, purple, and then we have this yellow, and then we have a secondary color which is like this teal kind of blue. Okay, so whenever you are combining primary and secondary, you will end up with a tertiary color. So if you combine red with a blue, red with a yellow, you will get the orange color. Okay, so this is like the same, like if you combine this secondary, this primary color, you will get the tertiary color. Okay, that way the color wheel actually works. It doesn't matter how many colors that you have in the design, in the color wheel. You can always create different colors with it. If you mix this tertiary and secondary, you will get the middle color, which actually increase the color length in the color wheel. Okay, so that's basically how the color wheel basically work. Okay, combine two colors, you will get the another color wheel. Okay, so how you choose the colors is basically as you think. You have online websites like Color Hunt, colors.co, mycolor.space, color.adobe.com, and the Musli. Okay, and the color combination methods, there are multiple methods. Okay, so you can go with these kind of methods, so like monochromatic, complementary, tridac, and square. Okay, so monochromatic is color. Basically, this color palette is actually comes under a monochromatic. Okay, so if you see there is a primary color, there is just a change of the hue and it will make your another color, and that's you can reduce the value, and that way you can create your third color. So this type of color picking actually comes into a monochromatic way. Okay, so you are not going completely opposite or tridac way. Okay, complementary color means it's like you have to go opposite. So let's say this is this color is your first color, then this color is your secondary color. Okay, so that way opposite colors, so completely opposite poles, if you take the colors, this is called a complementary colors. Okay, so this primary to this, you will get it's like a complementary colors. That's way you can pick the complementary colors. Tridac means you have to pick a what to say, it should be triangle. So this orange, this thing, and this thing becomes your tridac color. Okay, so this is basically the triangle. Okay, if you take the triangle, it will be like also a primary color. So this is also make a triangle. So this is way of picking colors is basically means a tridac. It doesn't matter which color you pick. This is just for the example that I'm showing the limited colors. You most of the time it's will like thousands of colors, or maybe you can get a very kind of gradient between them. Okay, that's how the color wheels are set up. Okay, if you go with a square certainly means this color, this, and this one. So it's basically a square or a rectangle. If you say here, this is like a square. Okay, so if you want to four colors, if you want to pick a four colors, it becomes a square. Okay, then I wanted to cover it's like how you apply the colors for the UI design. Okay, so always you have to heard that there is a method which is called 60-30-10. Okay, so 60-30-10, how you use, you have to pick a three colors. Okay, once you pick the three colors, you have to apply those colors on your UI. So whenever you are applying, so 60% here in the example, if you see, there is a 60% which is white. Okay, so there is a lot of area which is white color is there. Now once you come to 30%, you have to use your second color. Okay, so this is basically your second color, and once you hit the third color, this is your accent color. So whenever there is a CTA buttons or any kind of very important things on the UI, you can apply that color and you will get the 10% out of it. Okay, so if you use this method, this is very easy while you are creating a UI. Okay, so this is about the things about the colors and how you pick them and how you have to use them. Okay, this is just a one method which is like 60-30-10, but there are other methods also which I am not covering today, but this is basically the right ratio method. If you practice this thing more and more design, you will get the hang out of it. Okay, here there is also a pattern generator, which is like if you don't want to go with the colors and you want to go with the pattern generations, you can follow these websites. Here you can create amazing patterns with it. Okay, so yeah, so that's basically about the colors. So how you choose. Okay, if you are not truly sure about your color palette, then I will suggest all of you to just go onto the online websites where you can directly take the colors from it. Okay, because online websites has a different categories also. When there is a pastel, monochromatic, or you want to go with any kind of method which is like tridac or like a square kind of methods. Okay, so that way they have a categories, and that way you can take the colors from it. Okay, so that's basically the color. Color actually plays a huge role in the UX design. And if your colors are not right, then your UI will be look like this. Okay, which is not acceptable. Okay, and always whenever you are choosing any color, make sure you have some justification around it. Okay, so UX justification is like expected from you. So let's say if I'm picking this green color, so let's say if I'm designing for any kind of sports brand, right? So sports or gymnastic or any kind of thing where the high energy is required, and these days people are using very like a neon kind of colors. So if I'm picking this color for it, I have a right justification around it. If I don't have a justification, or it's just like whatever I like, I pick it. It's not, it doesn't work that way. Okay, so that's basically the color palette. Now the second thing is about the grids. Okay, so whenever you are designing a website or application or any kind of thing, let's say for you're designing for the iPad. Okay, but whenever you are designing, it's not just a UI design, it also applies on the graphic design principles. There are number of grids that designers are follow. Okay, so this is just an example I shown here, but in the grids there are multiple ways to set up a grid. Okay, so this is basically the examples of the grid. So first grid will be like an 8-pixel grid. Okay, this is very famous in the mobile design. Whenever people designing for the mobile devices or an iPad or any kind of tablet devices, they mostly use this 8-pixel grid. Okay, because it's very easy to set up this grid. Plus it actually whenever you are designing with this grid for a mobile and tablet, the design will be very consistent and it will look good. Okay, there is a 12 column grid which is very famous for the designing a website. Okay, if you know, or if you ever talk to your developer, they will be always telling you like they are following basically a bootstrap grid. Okay, so when they said it's a bootstrap grid, that simply means it's a 12 column grid. There is also a 14 column grid, but most of the developers are actually following this 12 column grid. Okay, in even 12 column grid also, there is a two types of grids are there. Even though if your developer is developing with a bootstrap or foundation or any kind of like a front end or design system, so they will be always saying there is a two types of grid. First is a fixed size. So let's say this is your display, and if your grid is inside and actually gives you left and right, and it doesn't matter if you even though stretch this thing. Okay, so it doesn't matter like how wide your desktop size is, the grid will be always centered and it will actually give you the 12 column. Okay, so and there is another grid which is very flexible. Okay, so it's like a responsive grid. So how far your desktop will grow, the grid will grow with that. Okay, so it's always like responsive. It doesn't matter what is the width of the grid. Okay, so this basically column size will actually change once your display go bigger and bigger. Okay, in Figma you can also set up a grid which is like a row wise, and this is basically the column wise grid. You can customize this grid from here, from a layout grid options. So you can basically stretch, center, or you want to set up a custom width for your columns, you can do that. You can set the offset, you can change the gutter size, and basically you can set up your grid. Okay, I hope you are you already know these things, but I'm again repeating. So if you don't have any grid in place while you are designing the UI, your UI will look like it doesn't actually aligns very well. Okay, so it will be like your card will be here, your card will be not having the right spacing, or it will not look aligned. Okay, and it's also a challenge for the developer to convert your design into a code. Okay, so basically if you have a grid, that will be very easy for him to convert that grid and work with your design. There is also another grid which is like golden ratio and those kind of things, but I'm not today cover that golden ratio, because golden ratio grid actually has it's basically gives you very random results. Okay, depending on how you use it. Okay, so in the UI design, make sure you have like any kind of grid in place before even going with the visual design. Okay, so that's basically the grid for you. Now I will go with the fonts. Okay, so choosing a font is always a very hectic task for any kind of projects. And if you have like 3 or 4 projects in hand, or you are just jumping between the designs, jumping between the projects, then it will be very difficult for you at the starting point when you are choosing a certain fonts for the projects. Okay, so this is basically a bad example here I'm giving. So how you set up a fonts. Okay, you should not go with these kind of fonts. Okay, so first golden rule is just go with the 2 fonts. Okay, if it is difficult to choose a 2 fonts or pair the 2 fonts, just go with the 1 font. Okay, but that 1 font, you has to be a very clear. Okay, so the example will be like, this is actually the example of the bad fonts in the UI. Okay, you might be seeing these custom fonts in the Samsung phones, but those are just subjective, like people are using because they like it. It doesn't matter, like millions of people who are using the Samsung phone has the same kind of font, it will not go. Okay, so what they are doing, they are choosing a very simple font which actually applicable for any kind of application. Okay, so whenever you are choosing a font, let's say you are choosing a 1 font. Okay, so make sure that always that font actually has enough of font weight variations into inbuilt. So let's say here I am choosing a Rubik font. Okay, so if you see, Rubik font has a multi variations. Okay, and this is the font also which is available on the Google sites. Okay, so this is basically a Google font. So what is the good thing about the Google fonts? You might be saying they are free. What else? Okay, so even though for the your developer, implementing a Google font is very easy for him. Okay, if you are going with any kind of custom fonts like this, then it will be very difficult for him to bring those fonts, convert them into a web font, and then they have to use or host those font in their website, and then they have to use it. Okay, so it's basically a tedious process whenever you are going with the custom fonts. Okay, so if you are going with this font, make sure it's hosted somewhere. Sorry. Okay, so make sure it's hosted somewhere, or it actually has enough variations to play with. Okay, why you need a variations? Because you want to create a visual contrast between the typography. Okay, so let's say if you are going with the header and the body copy, so you should create at least a quite good of variation when you are doing the UI design. Okay, if there is a typography hierarchy in your design, the design will be looking very kind of like simple, and it doesn't actually attract anyone on the website. Okay, it doesn't look good. It will actually create a very kind of immature kind of vibe. Okay, for the designer. So always go with the one font. If you're not sure, if you're sure with what you want, or your client wants certain fonts in the design, then go with the fonts which actually has a good number of variations on the font weight. Okay, so how to pair a font? Okay, there are multiple websites which actually give you the font pairing thing. Okay, so recently I found out this website. So if you go into Google, you type this website name. Here you can see there is a free font section, there is a Google fonts, and then there is a Adobe fonts. Okay, so if I before going to anywhere, I just search into it, what looks good, what is not. So let's say if I like this font, if I click on it, it actually gives you basically like an example how to use this font. Okay, so from just the glance of it, you will feel like you are also getting a download here. So let's say it's a paid font, right? So basically it actually gives you a vibe in the UI how it will look like. Okay, there are multiple websites like a Typeform, FontJoy, or FontPair. They will actually gives you the font, right? Font combinations, basically how it will look in the UI or how it will look like. Okay. The reason behind I'm choosing these websites because it actually gives you an example how to set it. or if you are sure about, you can just directly go with the Google fonts, and basically you can search there like however the font that you want. Okay, so that's basically the font thinking. Okay, and how I taken this font combinations is actually I'm taking this from the Fontware website, where it actually shows you that the header line is basically the Oswald font and the body copy is like a Source Sans Pro. Okay, so this is like basically the examples like Nuneato Sans. So these two fonts is basically the same. Okay, I just play with the weight of the font and actually gives me a variation. Okay, so if you are going with the one font only, that will be very good for you, or in the long run kind of thing. Once you are comfortable, unless you are not comfortable with the font pairing, it will be easy for you to maintain the one font. Okay, so that's basically the fonts, like how to combine the fonts or something. Okay, and how to choose a font. Basically, don't go with the custom fonts. They don't have, sometimes, many times they don't have a consistent like kerning between them. Okay, so they don't have a consistent line height or consistent, like, see here, this is the font that I'm using, Princess Sophia. It does not have any kind of weight. Okay, so it's basically the dead end font, one single font, and you have to use it. Okay, so don't use these kind of fonts. The next thing in the UI design is basically components. Okay, so components is very important for the UI design, because that's the thing that you have to design. Okay, but before designing for the components, it's very important you to understand the anatomy of the components. Okay, so what I mean anatomy means, it's like, let's say for this is an example of the input field. Okay, so this is the input field, the style of the material design. So whenever you are designing an input field or anything, you have to understand the component states, you have to understand the behavior of the component, and also for the interaction of the component. Okay, so while creating any kind of component, you always have to think these things first. Okay, if not, then your developer might be asking you the different states that component will go with. Okay, so once the deliver, it will ask you. So instead of he ask you beforehand, you just have to specify this thing, or at least have an idea how this component will behave. Okay, good example will be like a checkbox. Okay, so if you are using a checkbox in your UI design, and let's say there is a UX requirement where someone says that I need to select multiple things. Okay, so for the multiple things, you always have to go with a checkbox instead of the radio button, right? Because the radio button implementation, by default implementation of the radio button is like you have to select one of them. You can't select everything, right? So whenever you are designing, you always have to put those components in the place which actually required from the UX side. Okay, so whenever it completely depends on your requirement, how your things in the UI will actually behave. Okay, and then there is also things where whenever you are specifying your components in Figma specifically, always go with the best practices. Okay, what I mean with the best practices is like, you might be seeing this example thousands of times. So let's say I want to create a button with a Figma, right? So what I do, I just type here button. Okay, let's change the font. Okay, so I'm typing a button. Instead, some of the softwares you have to do that, you have to write this, like you have to create the rectangle, then you have to create this text, right? Then you have to select both, you have to align, and then basically what you do is like you group them. That's how we create a button in some of the things, some of the like a UI design software. Currently, this is the way that we are creating buttons in Adobe XD. Okay, I hope most of the people are using Figma. So in the Figma, what we do is like we are creating components while like with the auto layout. So if I hit Shift A, it will actually put this thing in the auto layout, and it will create basically a good button for you. Okay, so this is basically like a responsive button. Okay, so if you introduce any kind of color here, let's say this color, and whenever I am changing this text, it actually scale the button and actually give me a good button. Instead here, I just have to type things and it will go out. Okay, so always create a component with the best practices in the software. Okay, Figma actually gives you a good number of flexibility with the tools where you can create a good level component. Okay, so whenever also there is one more thing, whenever you are creating a component, okay, so let's say this is like an auto layout, I set up things, and whenever you are creating a component, you should always think about all kind of possible types of the component. Okay, so what I mean about the types of the component is like, let's say you are creating a button or something. So let's say this is like my button, right? Now this button actually has some text. Okay, and there is also one button where you need some kind of like icon or something. So let's say I will just put a material icon here. Yeah, so let's say I'm taking this icon and putting here. Okay, so this is my button. Okay, if you say that this kind of buttons, you only need this. Sometimes you also need a left side icon and you also need a right side icon, right? So whenever you are creating a component, you always think about all the possibilities, like how you can combine them. So it's very easy to create a one button, and then you can make a component and you can just introduce let's say a variations out of it. Okay, so whenever you are introducing a variation, that will be very easy for you to remove the icons and basically create the variations of the components. Okay, this has to, you have to think from the first hand. Okay, whenever you are doing something. Okay, don't convert your component after don't convert your groups into component after you design the whole UI. Okay, so if you are doing this from the starting itself, it will be very easy for you to maintain that design after. Okay, so let's say if someone will come up with a design change, then you have to change it very quickly, instead of you were telling your people like the project manager or something, that it will take at least for 2 or 3 days for me to change those things into a like how many, like 80 90 kind of screens. Okay, so if you are going with the component, that will be very easy for you to maintain the design. Okay, the next thing will be a imagery. Okay, so most of the people they are not forgetting this thing, but there are some of the things where you can improve in terms of the imagery. Okay, so what you have to not to do. Okay, so this is like a first example of what not to do in the UI design for the images. So let's see, if you see here, this image is very blurry. Okay, and it doesn't actually shows good in the UI design. If you use this image in any kind of UI design, it will actually not looking good, right? It actually shows that you just lazy or something, that you pick that image from the Google and you just have to put it. Okay, so always make sure your design, your images are top quality. Okay, so that way it will be good, the UI will actually look good. Okay, and it's also good for the people who are actually consuming your UI. Okay, the second thing will be a small and busy images. If you see, this image is very small, plus it's very busy. Okay, so instead of using this image for this section, I will just use any icon or something. Okay, or I will just put an animation or lottie animation or party popper or something like that. Okay, because this kind of size is very difficult to understand like what it is in the image. Okay, if it is just one single person like her, that will be fine. But instead of using this size and with this kind of busyness in the UI, in the images, basically, which is not accepted. Okay, it doesn't matter like you are designing for the mobile UI or for the desktop UI or tablet UI. Okay, so make sure your images are not too small and not too busy. Then there is a emotion in the images. Okay, so it's completely dependent on you or about the projects, what kind of subject that you're going with. But always make sure whenever you are using images, it actually translate those emotions into a UX. Okay, so if the UX wise, if you are using happy and good quality images, it actually influence the customers or end user basically of that application or a website. It will actually good put a good impact on them. If you are putting any kind of sad and basically kind of like problems kind of images, so basically they actually affect your end user negatively. So whenever you are using images, make sure they are actually echoing the same kind of principles that principles or vision basically from the brand itself. Okay, then there is the unrelated images. Okay, first of thing, don't use these kind of things. Okay, basically these kind of images where the people are not actually showing exactly but just a body part or something. Make sure the image should be clean. Okay, if you are using big or small, make sure your image will be clean. Next is like a unrelated imagery. Unrelated imagery, what I mean is, let's say this is like a website where I can sell a birthday cake, right? So, and I'm using this image, which is actually, it doesn't relate to anything at all. Okay, so unrelated imagery, you might be creating this thing, or while you can just using it as a placeholder or something, and you said later on I will swap these images or something like that. So even beforehand, don't use these images, because whenever you are showing your work to someone which is like a half cook or half done, and you are showing these kind of images, and you will just tell them, okay, those are dummy images, I will change later, but it doesn't make sense to them. Okay, so whenever you are showing something to the client, make sure it's actually good. Okay, and it should be like actually convey the same message that they want to convey to the end user. Okay, and yeah, these are the basically the online sites where you can pick the right images. Okay, make sure you are picking the right images, the emotion wise also, from the quality wise also. If you are picking the images from these websites, then obviously the quality will be the top notch. But in terms of the emotions or in terms of the unrelated things, you have to find the right image for it. If you're not finding a right image, make sure you use any kind of like a illustration. If you're not finding an illustration, you will at least find a lottie file or any kind of animation with it. Okay, so yeah, so these are the basically the websites, the Pixels and Pixabay. These two, everyone knows about this. So there are multiple websites like a Buzz, TalkSnap, Negative Space, Carbon Pix. Okay, where you can find a good quality images. You can also find a good quality images on the freepik.com. Okay, so yeah, that's basically about the imagery. Okay, next thing is about the feedback and collaboration. Okay, so this is really kind of a thing where it depends on you how you actually perceive your career as a designer. Because I saw many designers who are actually thinking they are designing well, and they are actually skeptical about the feedbacks, or if they are getting any suggestions from the designers or any kind of people, because they might thinking that they are always right, or people didn't understand what I'm doing, or it doesn't work for them, so I know I'm a designer, I know better. Surely there is something which is like you know better than them, but when it comes to the feedback, you should always have to be open about it. Okay, what I mean is like, uh, let's say you are designing with a team. Okay, so your company has like 10 or 20 kind of like designers in the team. Okay, while you are designing something, you have to always take a feedback from the other designers, which is like how the things will look like. Okay, and whenever asking them for feedback, you always have to tell about your project. Okay, what kind of emotions or what kind of vision that you want to translate from your side to the end user. Okay, so let's say if you are designing for the website, and if you are designing for the e-commerce website, right? So your final goal will be like what kind of like final goal will be like more and more people will buy from your website, right? So always think this thing and always make sure with these things whenever someone's give you feedback. Because if someone came to me directly and they will say, I don't like this color, I don't like this red color, right? So even before getting what this color, why the designer is using, they can't be a critic, they can't criticize your work, right? So before them to criticize your work, you have to understand that they know the entire context of it. Okay, why you did that, why you take these decisions, design decisions basically on top of that. Okay, so that way. And then there is another thing is like a constructive feedback. There is very few designers who actually know how to give a constructive feedback. Okay, you can't be like a client that I don't like this, I don't like that. It doesn't make any sense for the designer, right? So whenever you are asking a feedback from other designers, make sure they will give you a constructive feedback. Constructive feedback, what I mean is like if they didn't like the font, okay, so they will be giving you a reason why they didn't like the font. Okay, if they are just saying I don't like it, that is not a constructive feedback. Okay, if it is like a scratchy font or something weird font that you chosen from the some kind of random website, okay, and you use that font into your design, now a designer who actually does not have any kind of like knowledge to how to give a constructive feedback, he will just come to you and tell you that this font is weird, I don't like it. Okay, where the another designer who actually understand how to give a constructive feedback will come to you and he will tell you that I don't like this font because it actually gives me a message of this is like kind of like scary, or animal is scratching on the screen, it looks like that. Okay, so if you're going with this kind of vibe, then this font is correct. If you are not want to go with this kind of scary and scratchy kind of vibe, then you should consider another font. Okay, whenever designers are saying this, they will be very polite, or they will be always give you they will always say in a way where you don't feel weird. Okay, what I mean is like he doesn't tell you that do this, okay, in the commanding way. Good designers are always tell you that you know your work better. Okay, if you think you have to keep this or you want to change because this is my kind of take on your design, then you have to go with and you can change it, but it's completely dependent on you what kind of message that you want to translate. Okay, so this is basically the feedback side of it. Now where there is another thing which is like a collaboration. While you're collaborating with the other designers, okay, it's always good that you both designers on the same page. Okay, what I mean is like if you are every designers currently basically have their own style of designing. Okay, whether it's a process or whether it's a UI design side, there is designer who's actually following the same style, okay, continuously to actually give them a good results because they figure it out that what actually gives them a good results. But there are designers who actually always experiment with the different trends on the Dribble or Behance side, right? So if these two designers are collaborating with each other, there is high chances that they will be having completely different opinion about the design. Okay, some designers say I will go with a very clean and modern kind of design. Some designers said I will go with a new brutalism or any kind of trend which is available on the Dribble. Those are looking cool, so I will use that kind of thing. It's basically a clash. Okay, so make sure whenever you are collaborating with some other designers, you have to tell them that what you think is the right way, and then try to understand his own take on that, like how we can design with it. Okay, so whenever you both are designing, it should be on the same pace, same theming, or basically the same kind of process that you follow. Okay, so this is basically the feedback and collaboration. Next, we have a experiment always. Okay, so this is basically the last slide of this session. Experiment always means many designers or many articles are saying that don't use a dribble for inspiration while you're designing. Okay, but I don't basically support that kind of thought where people are saying don't go to dribble, don't go to Behance, don't go to this website and learn design, because those designs they never developed, or it doesn't actually feels right with the UX and doesn't make it. Okay, don't listen to them. This is not the right way to designing the UI. Okay, so whenever you are in the beginner stage, you always have to see what is best in the market. Okay, might be there are some designs everything is taken from the dribble. Okay, there are might designs which can't be developed, or there is not, developers are not enough educated to develop those websites in the code. But there are high chances that every design on the dribble which is actually possible to design and develop. Okay, so whenever someone putting their designs on the dribble, they just want to explore as a designer what is possible with the UI. Okay, so whenever you are off from your work, or whenever you are practicing these things, just try to go to the dribble, find the coolest design that you found, and just recreate that design in your own style. Okay, whenever you are very beginner, like one year or something, or even year of experience, okay, just try to recreate that design with just a screenshot. So let's say if I take this screenshot and I just replicate this design. Okay, just try to replicate. If you are consistently replicating the UI, you will be like maybe in 8 days, or like say 15 days, 8 or 15 days, you are actually developing a taste about the UI. Okay, and whenever you are actually developed a taste or your style of designing the UI, that is actually comes handy in a long run, while you are like how many years that you are designed for any company or for yourself only. Okay, so it's always good that you go to the dribble or a Behance, find the cool design and just try to mimic that design. You don't have to post this thing anywhere. Okay, because my people will be saying, okay, this is just a combination, this is just a replicate, you just copy the UI from here and there. Okay, this is not for the people, this is not for the show off. This is basically for yourself to understand how how the best designers actually doing their UI. Okay, so this is basically the experiment kind of stuff. Whenever you are experimenting with the different kind of styles, you have to always go for a website which actually gives you a design inspiration. Okay, now the last thing which I want to cover is like okay, so I don't have a slide or example, but I will tell you. There is a book which is I actually read some months ago. Okay, which is actually telling me that nothing is original. Okay, so you might be thinking like how it is, like there are designers who are actually making this like cool kind of websites and designs, right? And you are telling that this is not original, then which is original, right? So basically it's not about the originality, it's just about you didn't know the references that they are using. Okay, so what I mean is like there is no design in the world basically which is original. Okay, every single designer in the world, they are taking inspiration from certain things. Okay, how you take the inspiration or where to copy things from, it's basically the art, that where you have to take those things. Okay, what I mean is like whenever you are taking things from certain, don't take an entire thing. Okay, for example, if I go into this design, okay, so I will say okay, I like this design, I have a very similar kind of projects. Now if I want to copy, I can just copy entire thing. No, this is not the right way to copy things. Okay, there is a quote also, right, where steal like an artist. Okay, so as a UI designer, Obviously, UI designer is not an artist. Artist is a different thing. But even though some of the famous artists, actually how they work or how they influence from the other best artist is like you have to take a certain things. Okay. What I mean is certain things is like the way they are using the imagery here. Okay. So what they didn't use just pixel photo, just go to the pixel website, take the photograph and slap it here, right? So what they did actually, they take an image, they cut it out and they use it in their UI. Okay. So this kind of thing, I can take it. Okay. I don't have to copy the rest of the things. Okay. What I can see here, it's wrong is there are also wrong things about this UI, right? If you see the icons are not actually, what I say, it's the right icons. If you see 1, 2, 3, these are line icons. And the last one is basically a filled icon that they are using. So this is basically an inconsistency. But again, it's a choice of the designer. So you can go with that. But don't copy the entire thing. Just take some of the things which are actually looking good. Okay. So if you see here, this is basically the get started screen. And it actually show a really good image of the car, half a car at least. And then he has a text and then a button. A button is very legible. Anyone can click on this. Okay. So you can take some of the things which actually looking good. Okay. So if you see in this design, you can see a really good icon. The spacing is good. This notch is actually creating a really good, shape out of it. So you can take this shape and you can use that shape in your design. Okay. If you see the colors, the gradient, how they're putting, this is basically the transparent card. This style you can take in your UI. Okay. So don't take the entire thing. Okay. Just some of the things where you feel good about it. Okay. Here also, if you see this image, how they created it, if you take this style only and put your components and your screens in here, it will be really good header image for your project, right? So it's like some of the things you have to taken from the UI. Okay. Not everything. Don't just copy everything. Take some of the things. And while working on the visual design, always create a mood board. Okay. What I mean, a mood board is like not just the UI screens from the dribble, but actually, let's say some of the UI screens from the dribble. Now you also go to the pixel website, you take some imagery out of it. Okay. So how to choose the imagery? Obviously, let's say you are working on the real estate project. Okay. So you go onto the dribble, search for the real estate kind of projects. Okay. So once you choose the certain styles on the dribble, take those screenshot, put it on the board. Okay. Now go to the pixel.com, search for images which are basically showing you the real estate kind of things. Okay. So buildings, crossovers or roads or anything which is related to the real estate. Take those images also the place. Just go to the color website where you can picking the colors. Okay. So there are websites where you can just put the image and it will actually give you a color palette. Okay. It's basically just choosing a colors from it. There is Adobe website. I forget the name, but it will actually gives you a color palette from that image. Okay. Now, once you got that color palette, try to find similar color palettes on the colorhunt.com or any kind of website that you going for the color inspiration. Okay. So this is way you can create your mood board. Once the mood board is created, you will get the exact vibe that how you want to translate that into UI, right? The colors that you are choosing go with the UI, right? The imagery that you are choosing, similar kind of imagery your client also give you, right? Then you can translate those images onto a UI. Now, when you are doing the styles, you already have a similar styles taken from the dribble, what kind of styles that you go with. Okay. So always think like base level components are always similar. Okay. Layouts are different. Okay. So whenever you are experimenting with the layouts, it's always try to find a layout which is little bit distinctive. Okay. So if you see here, this design, right? So this is basically like a home kind of application, like you can switch on switch off the lights from the different rooms and basically calculate like how much kilowatt basically a current that you are using for a month or something like that. Okay, so if you see the layout is quite good. Okay, it's still busy some of the times where you can't read the text exact, but again, this is like a creative choices that designers are making. Sometimes they are right, sometimes they're wrong, but as a designer you have to understand what is wrong here. Okay, if you understand what is wrong, then you can improvise on that. Human mind is like that only. If I give you a base level design, then you will obviously improve that design, you will not make it worse. Okay, so human mind is that way only. So whenever some other person will ask you for a feedback or want to improve, it doesn't matter like it comes your mind or something, you will figure it out. Okay, that what is wrong with that. Okay, so it's basically like a teaching stuff, right? So whenever you are teaching something to someone, your core fundamentals also getting correct, or you will be also surprised that, oh wow, this is like a good kind of advice that I'm giving to someone, and it actually works for them, right? So this is basically the thing which is like experimenting and collaboration. Okay, so yeah, this is it for my session. Basically, if you have any questions, you can ask me. Hey, hi Aditya.
So hello, very nice session. Really like this. Basically, I wanted to know about the how I can choose color. I'm a bit confused when I'm choosing the color because I worked on the several domains, so I'm a bit confused how to choose the right color, how to make color correction right. So I'm more confused into this. So basically, this is my question regarding this. And as well as, is there any website where we can use good illustrations for free? And these two are the questions I have.
Right. So we'll start with the color first. Okay. So color is, there are a number of websites on the Google where you can just find those websites, basically like colorhunt.com. Okay. So myspace.colors, or there is also a Adobe website which is giving you the color palettes, right? If you don't want to go with the online things, you can always create your own color. But before creating your own color, you have to understand like how to choose a color. Okay, if someone came to you and they say, like, let's say some client came to you, okay, and they will say you that we want to build a brand and you have to choose a colors for us. Okay, so what kind of brand it is and what kind of service that they are providing, it depends on that thing, or basically the vision of the brand, to what kind of colors that you have to go with. If you know that every single color is actually giving you the same kind of emotion, okay, some kind of emotions with it. Okay, so if you're choosing a yellow, it's basically like a happy kind of mood, energetic kind of mood that actually yellow comes with. If you're going with a black, and white and black is also a color. Okay, don't just think they are just things are there. White and black is also a color, but black is actually showing you the power and basically the reputation and status kind of things. It actually gives you that kind of vibe. Okay, so just go with the one color, choose a one color. Okay, I will give you example. Let's say uh, if you have a one color in mind. Okay, so
Yeah.
we will say my space. Okay, so just go to this website. This website is called mycolor.space. Okay, and now it will ask you what is the main color. One color. Just choose a one color for the brand. So let's say I will go with this kind of color. Okay, and I will click on generate. So what this website gives you is like, it will give you additional secondary color with that color.
Okay.
Okay, so there are multiple variations how they choose the color. Okay. So if you are thinking that this first variation is actually looking good and I can use this colors with that color, okay, then go with this kind of palette. Okay. If you are not sure about that one color, let's say you can go with the colorhunt.com. Okay. So if you see here, we have a number of categories for the colors. Let's say I will go with the pastel colors. If I click on the pastel colors, it actually give me a some of the monochromatic versions of it. So this is basically example of monochromatic color. This is the example of monochromatic palette, right? So unless the colors are completely different, something like this is not a monochromatic because it's like a kind of opposite colors. Okay. While this is the same shade, right? It just decrease the value of it. Okay. So you can go with these kind of websites, or you can also like go and change with the popular and all kind of random things, right? So basically you can go with these kind of websites, okay, to choose a color. Any other question?
No, right now.
Okay. Yeah, Abid.
Hello, Akshay. I have a question about fonts. So sometimes I get confused between two fonts, to use two fonts, the one for heading and one for text. So how to get that complementary fonts? Because the application when I work on, it needs two fonts sometimes. So
sorry. Yeah. How to choose the two fonts?
Yeah, so one for headers or some heading parts, and the complementary font for the text, or the text font for the complementing the header.
Right. So whenever you are choosing a font, let's say you are choosing a two fonts, okay? So sans serif font is always like, there is a two types of fonts, right? One is very simplistic, okay, where the readability levels are always like high, okay? And then there is a header font, okay? So it's like a serif font or sans serif font. You have to go with these two combinations. Okay. So as I show you, like there are some websites where you can check the font pairs, right? Whether with the Google kind of Google fonts or whether it's the free fonts. If it is a paid fonts, you can also go in the Adobe stock and find the right fonts for your thing. But I will tell you that always choose a font from the Google, because it's actually very easy for the developers to develop. And whenever you are choosing a font, you always have to go with always go with a multiple weight of it. So font weight has to be always on the higher side, okay, to create that variations.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone has any question?
Like I have one more question regarding this. Sometimes we have to like you already told about the person who give you feedback according to a design. Like he will give a genuine feedback that this is the reason behind that this design is not looking good. So sometimes they ask, but sometimes we can't explain them because like I just put it just to make the beautification only. So like every time giving a reason, like I didn't able to click, like my mind is not able to click easily that this is the reason behind it, because sometimes we just use for beautification. So beautification can be the reason behind putting anything or making a card like that.
Right. So just for the aesthetic purposes, you can choose certain things like a fonts or not a fonts, basically colors or something, okay, and you don't have a reason for it. So person who is actually giving you let's say for a criticism that I didn't like this, or do you have any kind of explanation behind it, okay? So whenever someone say that, you have to tell them, is basically you have to ask them what is their reason to not using these kind of things.
Okay, understood.
If they give you like I don't like this, then you should ask them, right, why you didn't like it. if he does not have a like right reason for it, just because saying that I don't like this, it doesn't work that way.
But they just normally say ki why you put this, why you're putting this, why you're not using that. So that time I got confused.
Okay. So make sure that whenever you are using certain things, okay, big things, right? Not just like a one icon or a one small
Okay.
text,
Mhm.
right? So whenever you are choosing colors, right, with the colors you have an explanation, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Big things like why you choose this font, you have an explanation, right? Whenever you are experimenting with the shapes or anything in the
Yeah.
UI, right?
Mhm.
These things not always has to be a reason behind it.
Okay.
Okay. And if even though if you are saying I just feel it actually looking cool, okay, then it is actually a right thing to do. Okay, you can say that just
Okay.
because
Okay.
I feel it. Unless someone is not actually offended by that shape, right? What you are doing is not that wrong.
Understood. Understood. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Anyone else? Anything? Okay. I guess no one has any questions, so I will wrap this session.